Are you searching for a deeper understanding of your faith?
Inspiring Philosophy is your go-to resource for exploring the rich tapestry of Christian thought.
From biblical archaeology to philosophy of mind, we dive into the topics that matter.
Our content bridges faith and understanding, offering insights into God's existence and the reliability of the New Testament.
Join a community where faith meets reason and discover the answers you've been seeking.
Inspiring Philosophy, where faith meets understanding.
Why are we here today, guys? Why are we doing this with our lives? What is happening to this world?
I ask myself that often.
Man. Okay, so lately there have been some atheists claiming that Paul may or may not have existed, but he may not even have written any of his letters. And it has taken the atheist internet by storm. And that's why we're here to talk about this. So, welcome, lying scholar Tony Costa and dishonest mixologist Eric Manning. Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Michael and Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's the first time me and Tony have been on a live together. So that's
it is. Yeah.
So originally, Hopeful Theism, who can't make it, unfortunately, was going to join us and go through some of this stuff. It was his idea to address this, and I was like, yeah, I guess we should address this. So what is happening right now in the internet world with this whole theory? You guys have seen some of the videos I've seen. Eric, what's going on?
I mean, Paul clearly doesn't exist. It's obvious. Even if you disagree, then you just have serious cognitive dissonance, bro.
Totally.
Yeah. No, it's weird. It's a weird theory. It seems like it's a bit strange. This scholar, her name is Nina. Is it Livesley? I don't want to mispronounce her name.
I think it's Livesley.
Yeah, Livesley. That's right. Wrote like a pretty big monograph. It's $100. It's not cheap to get a hold of. But she's done a few interviews on some different channels. And she says that she seriously doubts the existence of Paul. She doesn't think any of his letters are written by the Apostle Paul. She says that basically we don't see a collection of these letters until the 2nd century. So they're probably dated to the 2nd century. And here's the real kicker is they're based on the book of Acts. Like this fictional Paul was reading Acts, apparently, and decided to pen some letters. And she says that she has reasons for it. I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's the mother of all conspiracy theories. But she's a Jesus. She's part of the West Star. Is it West Star Institute?
West Star Institute. Yeah.
So she's up there with the Jesus seminar and all this stuff.
Tony, you're a real scholar, even though you're clearly a lying scholar because you believe in Christianity. There's no reason for scholars to believe Christianity is true unless they're dogmatic or lying. We all know that is true. So what is your take on this? Didn't you write your dissertation on an aspect of Paul?
Worshiping the risen Jesus in the Pauline letters. Yeah.
It must be filled with lies.
Yeah, it must be. Yeah. I mean, all my 10 examiners that I defended the thesis in at Radboud University in the Netherlands, they were certainly convinced that the Apostle Paul was a real historical person. I just find that that Dr. Livesey I mean, when you look at the West Star Institute, we all know about the Jesus Seminar, and we know that they came out with the book, The Five Gospels, and they said that Jesus only spoke less than 20% of what is attributed to him. And in the Lord's Prayer, the only words Jesus spoke was "Our Father." That's it. That's all we know. And it was all, as you guys know, it was all voted on by marbles, by colored marbles. And yeah, and so yeah, it's like a gambling version in scholarship. But the idea that Paul doesn't exist. I mean, we've heard of the Christ mythicists who are saying Robert Price, who's also a member of the Jesus Seminar, Jesus didn't exist. He also denies Paul existed. But this is she's not the only scholar that's denied Paul's existence or his letters. But it's not surprising that you when you deal with the Jesus Seminar, you're dealing with a very hypercritical group of scholars. Hypercritical. And so,
sure.
yeah, like Robert Price. I mean, he's denied Jesus existed. Now he denied Paul existed. He's probably going to come out with a new book saying he doesn't exist. But the idea that Paul didn't exist is quite preposterous. And the way she goes about doing it is quite humorous, because most liberal critical scholars don't trust the book of Acts. They actually trust the Pauline letters over the book of Acts. And they use the Pauline letters to judge the book of Acts. And she does it the other way around. And she even implies that the Galatians read the book of Acts, because in her interview, when Paul says, "You know how I persecuted the church of God," and how would they have known that? Like, Paul couldn't have told them in a previous missionary journey to them when he planted the church, could he? They must have gotten it from the book of Acts. So it really is. I mean, you have to shake your head that some scholars are actually talking like this. It is just astonishing to me.
If you guys don't believe us, I'm just going to play this clip from the end of the interview we're going to go through. Just hear straight from her mouth. This is what she says about Paul.
Right? So I don't know if the historical value is what's the most important thing. In fact, if you say Paul is historical, then I think you've got a problem, because then what happens to this person? Because everything else that succeeds Acts, as we think of it, as apocryphal literature, and Paul shows up in some of that literature. So what would have happened to that person? We have no history. The whole history of anything that might have been historical, nobody has any history of it. It doesn't exist. So it stops. And I don't know that there was a history there. So there's a conceptual problem with that.
So you're not sure Paul existed?
Right.
All right, there you heard it, folks. We didn't make this up. I mean, there she is saying it. We're not sure Paul existed. Who knows who wrote those letters? I mean, obviously there was this clever forger who wrote letters
from the Marcionite school. From the Marcionite school.
Like, it's what is her actual? I was confused. I listened to that interview. I listened to another one. What is her actual theory on when these were written, why they were written, who wrote them? Do either of you know? Because just help me out here, because I was trying to figure it out while I was working out, and I was like, I don't know what she's even trying to argue at this point.
Shoni, you want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
Okay. She thinks that they came possibly. She kind of hedges a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for all her hedging, I think she really does believe this stuff. I think she's just trying to kind of sound more scholarly that way. I'm not trying to psychologize, but it's just a guess there. But anyway, she thinks that they probably came out of a Marcionite school of early Christian Marcionites, which aren't really Christians at all, obviously. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the 2nd century. That's when she thinks these letters came about, because she thinks Acts came about in the 2nd century and that it's dependent on Acts, which is crazy. Because usually even a lot of skeptical New Testament scholars like Bart Ehrman will say, no, I think there are discrepancies between Acts and Paul's letters. So they're not dependent. They clash in certain places. Now, I think Tony and I and you probably would say that we could harmonize in a non-forced way some of these discrepancies, but They're not like you'd smooth the things out if you were looking at Acts and copying.
So like these come out of like the Marcion school in the 2nd century. Like then why is like First Clement referring to these letters? Why do we think?
No. Good question. Because I watched this interview today. She suggests First Clement. Now I understand the dating you could have there's questions about First Clement being written in the 1st century. And so
whose phone is that? Turn that off.
Sorry. This is my wife forgot to shut off the she just put the do not disturb on. Sorry, guys.
Is a professional channel.
Mea culpa.
Anyway,
just like a lying scholar.
Okay, so First Clement was written like what at like the end of the 1st century.
It's traditionally when it's dated. Now the arguments for that aren't like totally airtight. But this is where it gets wild. Is she floated in this interview I listened to today on the Westar Institute's YouTube channel that like maybe Clement didn't really exist.
Yeah,
Polycarp probably didn't exist. Ignatius, who also mentions Paul, didn't exist, and so you have layers upon layers of these fictional letters that are being written by these Christians of people that apparently just don't exist at all, and so it's like. Now you're really multiplying a bunch of nobodies.
It's something. You have to think like in the 2nd century, there were some Christians who were so mad that there were just competing schools, I guess, and then they invented Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah, even the Marcionite school. I mean, what we know about Marcionite is that he removed the first 2 chapters from the Gospel of Luke because it was too Jewish. You can't have that circumcision stuff in there. And Mary and Joseph going and offering up the turtle doves and so forth. But then again, I mean, if he accepted all of the Pauline letters with some exceptions, I mean, the letter to the Romans, chapters 9 to 11, are very very central to the idea of the Jews. What happens to the Jews? Why did they reject Jesus? Is there a future redemption for them? And so on. So I mean, obviously he forgot to tear those out. Maybe he did. But why would he truncate the Gospel of Luke if the Gospel of Luke didn't exist for him to truncate and to edit? And so it presupposes Luke was already there and the book of Acts was already in the possession of the church. So again, I don't know why she's going to the Marcionite school because the New Testament did not go towards the Marcionite position. I mean, the New Testament canon is very clearly derived, the background, of course, the fountainhead being the Jewishness of Jesus and the Old Testament, Marcion throughout the Old Testament, right? It was the work of the demiurge. Yahweh, that evil demon, he's not the true God. He was the demiurge. So it just, I think you made a good point there that, it violates Occam's razor, right? They're multiplying multiplying causes here when really there is a simple cause to all of this. And it's not Dr. Livesey's thesis at all.
And the other thing too, just real quick, it seems like I think she will grant that Irenaeus is a real person. So who did Irenaeus said that he saw? He said that he saw Polycarp, and Irenaeus also accuses Marcion not of just cutting apart the Gospel of Luke, like you said, Tony, but that he shortened epistles of Paul, probably because there was Jewish elements in them. Mm-hmm. He cuts out the pastoral epistles because there's Jewish elements in those, like Timothy being the son of a Jewish woman and having a Jewish grandmother and all that other kind of stuff, and reading the scriptures, which would presumably be the Old Testament since he was a child. You also have Tertullian, who accuses Marcion of mutilating Paul's letters and omitting some entirely, which means that the church already had a larger unedited Pauline collection. And so
so we have dumb Marcionite Christians writing documents that accidentally lead to Orthodox Christianity. I mean, this is just a wild theory, man. I mean, there are so many issues here. So we're going to get into that video a little bit more, look at some of her actual arguments. But first, we'll get to some super chats here. How do you guys deal with myth vision in relation to Old Testament figures, Abraham, Moses, Joshua? What would it mean for Christianity if they did not exist? Yeah, see videos I have out there like biblical archaeology, Abraham, Exodus rediscovered, conquest. The recent video I just put out, the Torah is older than you think. I got a lot of good evidence to support the reliability of these documents, and therefore would also circumstantially help attest to these figures being real.
Yeah, I would also recommend Mike Kenneth Kitchen's Ancient Orient and Old Testament, which is an excellent book where he
I've cited
argues
it.
for the historicity of the patriarchs and Moses and Joshua and so forth. So what would it mean? Well, we'd be in trouble because Abraham is a forefather of Jesus Christ. He's in the genealogy. And also Christians are children of Abraham, sons of Abraham by faith in Christ. So there would be a problem there. Jesus certainly believed they existed, and he spoke of them.
Rokid says, even Richard Carrier would be rolling his eyes. Sir, you don't even know the half of it.
That's true.
Richard Carrier actually wrote on this last year. So he wrote an article in February of 2024, and he talks about it. So he talks about Live See stuff here. So this is, and he says, this is my field. So I do have an expert opinion to voice in this matter. And it is not what one might expect. I'm not convinced. In fact, I'm not even remotely persuaded. So yeah, he is rolling his eyes. And it's really sad when we got to go to like Richard Carrier to refute this. Like that's the world, that's the boat we're in right now. We're using Richard Carrier. Now, obviously, I think Carrier is just dismissing this because his pro-Christian bias. You know, the same thing that apparently Bart Ehrman has for not accepting the Jesus myth nonsense. He's got that. Carrier's got some of that pro-Christian bias right here, and that's why he won't accept this, obviously.
Yeah. Another reason, guys, I think the pastoral epistles were rejected by Marcion is Paul takes potshots at Gnosticism. He talks about knowledge falsely so called. And so he makes these potshots at this type of Gnostic thinking. So that's another reason I think Marcion disliked the pastorals.
Yeah. Just so you know, Tony, some people are saying there's some echo coming through your speakers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Wasn't sure if you got headphones or something you could put on.
Okay. I don't, but maybe while you guys are talking, I'll just mute myself while you guys are talking.
That sounds good. Yeah. So. Will Bryson Gray debate you? I doubt he will on shore. He's been running his mouth saying Easter is pagan on Twitter. And I said, well, let's just debate it this weekend. And I'll if it happens, sure, I hope, but we'll see. So Apologia had a guest claim that the Christians killed Paul. Yeah. He's arguing from First Clement that Paul, who by reason of unrighteous jealousy endured not one, but many labors. So like jealous Christians killed Peter and Paul. And it's like, I was told we can't extrapolate too much from First Clement in arguing they were martyred for the faith, but now we can extrapolate and know there was this Christian war going on when they killed Peter and Paul. Like it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. There's no evidence for that beyond vague speculation from minimal data.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're told we're the ones who believe in things with not enough evidence.
Yeah, it's bad, man.
We have evidence for Paul. We have more evidence for Paul than Alexander the Great. And these historians only seem to care about it when it supports their beliefs. Now, to be fair, most historians seem to be rejecting this nonsense. But I mean, yeah, we have actual letters written by Paul. I don't think we have any of surviving documents from Alexander the Great, as far as I'm aware. You see, she's debunking that Paul existed from Dawa Troll. Thank you. Yes, for sure.
So who corrupted Christianity? I guess it was the Marcionite school, and the Gnostics did it. That's what it was.
It's the Council of Nicaea. They're just going to revert back to that. Did it all, you know.
Yeah, they took that book out of the Bible. Dang it.
Genuine question. How is the idea of a multiverse not more ad hoc than an intelligent designer? I genuinely can't find any sort of evidence for it. No, you're right. It is, and multiverse is more ad hoc than intelligent designer. This is Richard Swinburne's point when he's written about this. So for sure. Tony, why didn't you answer my call? Says Dawa Troll.
Yeah, I think he's just joking there. He said, good to see you. I think he's just ribbing me there.
I think he called you and you didn't answer. That's kind of rude. A little rude there. I don't know what you were thinking. Irenaeus made it all up. Maybe that'll be the new Paul for the Muslims. They'll just blame everything on Irenaeus. He corrupted it.
Well, he named all the Gospels too, obviously. So
yeah, for sure.
With his magic pen.
Yes. I purpose the theory that IP doesn't exist. I don't. Have you guys ever seen me in person? I'm an AI generated by the CIA to psyop you into believing Christianity is true so that, Zondervan can sell more Bibles. It's all part of the evil plan.
That's right.
It's working just perfectly.
It's going back to the Jews somewhere.
It's obviously everything's the Jews' faults. After a long day of work, I'm thankful that I get to listen to you guys on M6 way home. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome, Joe. Thank you for joining us. Even if you're up there in Canada, you're still welcome here. If you believe in post-mortem salvation, how do you reconcile that with the verse of the parable about the rich man that talks about the great chasm where no one from here nor there may cross over? Yeah, it's a Jesus thing. Jesus can cross the chasm, but we can't. It's just the same thing. So, okay, let's get to some of this video here. And we will dive into this whole issue of Paul existed. So let's just say Dr. Livesey is not the most charismatic speaker. So we'll stop it to like add some commentary, make it a little more exciting. But I mean, don't fall asleep while they're talking.
I think she can cure insomniacs for sure.
She can cure it for sure. She's definitely there.
Or after the composition.
To put my thesis out there.
When do you date the Pauline epistles, before or after the composition of the Gospels?
Come on. You can do it.
Well,
come on.
Once I realized, or I was getting quite convinced that the letters were not genuine, something important happened there, because those authentic letters are in the mid 1st century. They're dated there. They're placed there.
Right.
So once I decided they're not genuine, I could let go of that mid 1st century. And it was an easy move to make, I'll tell you, because in fact, there was a line in the book, and I think I removed it. There was nothing that held me to saying these letters absolutely need to be in the mid 1st century. Nothing held me there. The way that
real quick, Tony Costa, are there any reasons to date Paul to the mid 1st century that you can think of that might, I don't know, be relevant here?
No. I mean, Paul's clearly I mean, most New Testament scholars, liberal scholars, would say Paul's letters came first. I mean, you look at 1 Corinthians, it's dated to the 50s, 50 AD. And there he talks about, we have Easter's coming up soon. He talks about the witnesses to the resurrection. And he mentions Cephas, he mentions James, he mentions the 500 witnesses. I mean, he's talking about creedal information in verses 3 and 4 of 1 Corinthians 15 that he received, presumably from the apostles in Jerusalem, according to Galatians 1 and 2, and then he's passed on. That's very early material that Paul is quoting there. And so I cannot see why she would think that Paul's letters are much, much later, or, I mean, forged much later, even into the 2nd century. The internal evidence of the letters suggests that Paul is speaking from a 1st century position. He doesn't mention the destruction of the temple in AD 70. So presumably it's pre-70 AD for sure. So the internal evidence itself, I think, mitigates against Dr. Livesey here.
Well,
yeah. You also have, for example, like in 2 Corinthians, he's mentioning this king Atreus, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Aretas the fourth.
Yeah,
yeah. Someone, I forget how to pronounce it. Yeah. So I mean, like this minor figure from just like that time period in the 30s that no one would have cared about, like writing much later, because he was a minor figure that really only made his mark in the 30s and then disappears from history. Like that would have been more relevant when Paul was writing. Why would someone in the 2nd century feel the need to bring that up? Like these little things like just suggest mid 2nd century. But go ahead, Eric.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to bring up the same thing. He was the king in Abatia. He only briefly controlled Damascus around 37 to 39. Normally, the Romans controlled Damascus. And so this places Paul escape in a really narrow window that perfectly fits the timeline of his early ministry. A 2nd century writer, you would think, wouldn't know this historical blip. But in another interview that I listened to from her today, she just kind of was like, she just hand waves that. Is it like the fake Paul in the 2nd century like had access to Google or something? And so like it was weird. It was really weird. There's also the whole thing with Gallio being the person in Corinth that we see in Acts 15 or Acts 18, excuse me. And he was only there from 51 to like 52, like spring to spring or something like that. He was only there for a short year. And so we see from Acts that a lot of people will date the epistles of First Corinthians to that because of that reason. She just hand waves that one too, as if like that's just common knowledge that people in the 2nd century just would have. I guess they just go to down to the library, use the Dewey Decimal System or something, and pull out a bound book and just look that stuff up, because that's how that stuff works apparently. But yeah, it's weird how she just kind of hand waves that away and just magics it away in order for her to get her theory to work. Like she just is completely unfazed by that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they also don't quote the Gospels, which kind of would have been very, very important, or Acts, if they were writing, like after, like it. We see the Gospels and Acts come up a lot in Christian writings after they're on the scene.
Yeah.
They're not in Paul's letters, at least not in any sort of written form. But I mean, like, there's just a lot of good reasons to date Paul's epistles to the mid-1st century. I can't even understand where she's coming from.
Going back real quick to King Aretas, this is what Paul says in 2 Corinthians, that they were the ones that plotted against him. But if you read Acts, it says it's the Jews. And so again, that shows she's saying that this is all being copied from reading the book of Acts and like creating this fictional Paul making stuff up. And it's not hard to harmonize, like maybe the Jews instigated the whole thing with King Aretas and they kind of work together. An enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. But if like he was copying Acts, why not just say like it was the Jews? Why bring King Aretas in there to begin with? So there's that kind of tension there. So it's wild stuff.
Weird.
Wild and weird stuff.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tony.
Acts 18, you have the expulsion of the Christians by Claudius, the emperor, Roman Emperor Claudius, and Luke mentions that's where Paul met Priscilla and Aquila, and he talks about they were expelled from Rome, and we read about that outside of the New Testament, that he basically threw all the Jews out of Rome because they were making a commotion over this Christus guy. And so again, the author is speaking of something that he's very well aware of, and an event that is attested outside of the book of Acts.
Yeah.
Dating of mid-1st century comes about is internal, the internal references of the letter. So it's insular. And we all know that authors can write about Babylonia and be in the 20th century. So you're not going to say those.
Like I just said, she could just Google it, like in the 20th century, like apparently, like fake Paul, the Marcion guy is just like, yeah, man, let me get out my smartphone. I chat GPT. Can you tell me who was the ruler of Damascus between 37 and 39 AD?
What do you guys
That's
think?
like so ultra specific.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Anyway.
Powerful stuff there.
Powerful.
The composition of that piece took place in the Babylonian Empire. So we know that internal dating, it cannot be the final determiner of a text of literature, and the same is true for letters. So once I got freed up of that mid-1st century, then I could look at some of the references in the letter. And of course, the Paul of the letter knows about the passion, Jesus Christ on the cross, crucified. And then for me, the knowledge of that would have come from the Gospels. So
what
that made me say or think, and I still do think, the letters come after the Gospels.
Okay.
That's
all
what
right.
she said. That's what she said.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Paul talks. Okay, Paul talks about Jesus being crucified and all this stuff, and the only place he could have gotten that from, or this forger of Paul's letters could have gotten that from, is the Gospels. There's nowhere else this stuff could have come about. That's the argument, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we're dealing with here.
That's the argument.
Painful.
Help me out, Tony. Is there any other place you can think of where they could have gotten that from?
The apostles, the early followers of Jesus that connected with Paul, like Peter when he went to visit Peter and spent 14 days with him, and C.H. Dodd said they were not talking about the weather for 14 days. Clearly,
Clearly the forger in the 2nd century knew that, so he made that up in Galatians to account for that.
It's crazy. Well, guys, you also know that a number of the gospel, Luke is a letter. If you look at Luke's gospel and even the book of Acts, it's addressed to Theophilus. And so it's in a letter form. And then you look at the book of Revelation, it's also in a letter form. It's to the 7 churches of Asia Minor from John. So to say that the Gospels are different from the letters, Luke and Acts and the book of Revelation are letter form Gospels.
Yeah, it's a weird argument. I feel like the simpler explanation is just simply like, it was well known that Jesus was crucified. That's how Josephus knew about it. So that's where Paul would have gotten it too, from just it being a well-known historical fact. I feel like that's a much simpler explanation than thinking that they were so stupid they didn't know how to talk about Jesus being crucified. They had to get it from the Gospels. You can just say the opposite. Maybe the Gospels got it from Paul's letters. Like, exactly. Why is it not going that way? Why does she have to say it's this way? There's just unexplained stuff there.
Wild stuff.
Yeah, wild stuff. Absolutely. Let's get back into this.
Absolutely. I'm really feeling stronger and stronger daily almost on this, that the letters need to follow Acts. They're derivative of Acts. So I think what we have is there's at least one gospel. It may be Marcion's gospel. And then we have Acts.
Yeah. Marcion's gospel came first,
That's a weird thing I've been hearing too. Like, the people have been saying, well, maybe Marcion's gospel is first. How would you even speculate that if we don't even have a copy of what he mutilated from Luke? But now we're hearing this crazy theory that, no, that one may have been first, guys. The one we can't even check. The one we can't check on, that one was first for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. 100%.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Remember, Michael, the Jesus Seminar also thinks the Gospel of Thomas was first century.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it quotes from the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John. So that took me for a loop when they first came out and announced that if you read the 5 Gospels published by Robert Funk and the others, they include the Gospel of Thomas with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as if it was on par with them from the first century.
I think they're just competing with themselves on what kind of weird thing that they could spin.
It seems like they're getting to that point now. It's like there's a new scholar that really wants to make their mark, so they had to come out with something crazier and crazier until we get to where we are now. The next person is going to come out going, Matthew wasn't written until the Council of Nicaea, guys. Like, you'll see that'll be the next one.
We have Acts, and then we have the letters. I think that's how it needs to go that way. So why we've known for a long time, at least in some circles, that Acts and the letters seem to know each other.
Yeah.
But of course, the scholarship, because of this authentic letter paradigm and the letters being early, it had to be that Acts, in that scholarship that shows that Acts and the letters know each other, it always had to be that Acts knew of the letters, but it never fessed up that it knew of the letters. And there's been some very good scholarship.
Okay, all right. So basically, like, they're super, super, super sneaky and clever and all this other stuff, and it never fesses up.
It's the clever forger.
And at the same time, like, they bumble around, they kind of make mistakes with, like, Paul's conversion to where, like, it's a very famous alleged contradiction that Galatians chapter 1 and 2, or well, especially 1, contradict Acts chapter 9. because there's like 3 whole years that go missing. Paul's in Arabia. In Galatians, there's nothing about Arabia. Again, we think these things can be, plausibly harmonized, but it's just like it's like, here's some guy pretending to be Paul, and it's like, you know what? 3 years in Arabia and and all this other stuff going on. Nah, like let me add that in there for some real dramatic flair and effect. What are we?
Well, it's like what I argued this a while ago. Like, some people were trying to claim the Gospels were based off Paul's letters, and I'm like, if that's the case, why did they argue like from 1 Corinthians 15 and make up this appearance to Peter, this appearance to James? Like, why aren't they doing that? Same kind of logic applies here. If Paul's letters are 2nd century, based off of Acts, you're going to go through and you're going to be like, hey, they went to Macedonia, letter to Macedonia. Hey, they went to Athens. That's a popular city, letter to Athens. All right, now we're getting none of that. We're making up stuff that doesn't show up in Acts, like this visitation to Arabia, visiting with Peter and James in Jerusalem. I mean, like, there was much better fiction you could have written if you were going to make this stuff up. I mean, like, what is going on? Like, Philemon? Like, who's Philemon in Acts? Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, it sounds like, honestly, again, I don't want to commit ad hominem, but it almost sounds like she's trying to put something out there that's going to sell. It's controversial and it's going to sell. Like what Bart Ehrman did with his books on, Jesus Interrupted and the Orthodox corruption of Scripture. He knows those variants have been always acknowledged by Christians. We know about the longer ending of Mark, the pericope adulterae, the woman caught in adultery, the comma Johannium. We know about these things, but he puts it out there. I think Daniel Wallace once put it best. He says that Bart Ehrman wears 2 caps, one for the academy and one for the popular culture. For the popular culture, it's like, oh, did you know there's these variants? The New Testament can't be trusted. They deliberately changed the text of the Gospels. And in academia, it's like, yeah, so what else is new, Bart? We've known this for at least 600 years of academic study of the New Testament. So,
yeah, you'll definitely it's definitely a crazy theory.
Well, by Bill Walker, for instance, his exegesis, almost scientific, detailed work to show that there's even linguistic parallels between Acts and the letters, and certain incidents that really show that Acts, and in Walker's view, Acts must have known the letters.
Okay, linguistic similarities between Acts and the letters of Paul. I don't know, maybe because Paul and Luke were friends. I just have a crazy idea that could be weird. The easier explanation than the clever forger of the 2nd century making up Paul. Or no, Acts. It's got to be the way her theory is. Acts makes up Paul for reasons. Then someone comes along later, another forger, is like, I want this made up character to also have written letters to certain minor or non-mentioned or places and people not even mentioned in Acts. This sounds like a great theory. This makes total sense.
Well, in 2 Corinthians 11, where he's like, it's like the cranky Paul needs a nap and he's upset with the Corinthians letter. And he talks about all the stuff that he's suffering. And he's like, 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift in the sea. Okay, why is he listing 3 different shipwrecks? Acts mentions 1, and it happens after this letter. And then why say 3 times beaten with rods when Acts only records 1 instance when he's in Philippi? Why not use these storytelling material if you're allegedly building Paul's image from Acts? And so instead we get like kind of some natural dissonance because they're, I don't know, maybe like real letters.
Because, Eric, it's because the clever forger knows that's what you were expecting. So they got to make up other things.
Yeah,
they got to let it seem more authentic because it's all part of the clever forger for sure.
So it's 4 shipwrecks, really. That's what the audience will really know.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a Monty Python skit, really, when you think about it. And yet, guys, the church accepted 13 letters of this guy called Paul, almost half the New Testament, 14 if you think Paul wrote Hebrews, which the Eastern Church did. And yet, the New Testament canon is comprised of half of its content is from this guy from the 2nd century. It just doesn't make any sense. It truly is ludicrous.
In order to talk about various things like the Jerusalem incident and things like that.
Okay, so the Jerusalem visit. Hold on,
But
real quick, because he's borrowing Galatians. Like you know this story from Acts, guys. Come on, you fake Galatians. You know that Paul was this persecutor and all this other stuff. Hint, hint. And she talks about the Jerusalem incident. Well, Galatians 2:1-10 is a private meeting with apostles 14 years after his conversion. Acts 15 is a public council. They're not the same visit. People will try to create, biblical scholars of more of her variety, the skeptical kind, will try and use this to create a contradiction and say, like, look, you can't trust these narratives. And Galatians is written by Paul, so this is like the real thing. And they're clearly not the same visit. A forger, you would think, would have tried to match Acts 15 like way more precisely. Galatians omits details, includes details that Acts omits, like Titus being uncircumcised, which is interesting because Titus isn't even in the book of Acts at all. And it omits key events from Acts, like the Jerusalem decree, which is a dead giveaway that this isn't, any kind of harmonized fiction. And so, again, it's weird. Like, if you are copying Acts, you have Acts as your template, you're not going to create this other thing that is going to be confused with this council. You're going to try and make it match the actual council, at least somewhat, instead of it being this kind of more clumsy kind of thing.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, let's keep going here.
one of the things, once you let go of that paradigm, then you start asking yourself, well, who's Paul? How do we get Paul? If they're not real letters and there's no first century Paul who wrote those letters, then I had to ask myself, well, how do we get Paul? And that's where I turned to Acts. And Acts is very strategic with Paul. The first part of it is Saul. And then he has this transformation. Well, he has the transformation in Acts 9, where he still remains Saul. But then in Acts 13, when you see the conversion of this fellow Sergius Paulus, Saul also is called Paul. So I feel that we get Paul from Acts. And that's how we know of Paul.
Okay, so again, she's not even positing a clever forger. She's positing a collection of them. You have to have someone like, I'm going to make up a Paul guy in Acts. Then I'm going to have another clever forger make up letters for him. I mean, this is just the very definition of violating Occam's razor.
Yeah.
I don't even know how she can put this out and pretend like this was a good idea.
Yeah, like Jewish people didn't have more than one name. Like, Thomas wasn't called Didymus. Jesus had apostles with Greek names like Philip and Andrew. and we think of Israel, Jacob. I mean, why couldn't Paul have a Hebrew name, Shaul, Saul of Tarsus, and being a Roman, why wouldn't he have a Roman name, Paulus? So I don't see what the mystery is here. She's making it sound like she just discovered plutonium.
Yeah, yeah, like it's like a spiritual thing, that they switch from Saul to Paul. Like it has this deep, profound kind of thing because he meets with Sergius Paulus, who's a real person, by the way, and we have inscriptions of him. But I mean, you have lesser known, obscure people even in Acts. Like you have Joseph, who's called Barsabbas, who's also called Justus. It's a triple name, and he's a candidate to replace Judas Iscariot. Like, what's the deep theological, spiritual meaning there? Silas and Silvanus, in between Paul's letters and Acts. Bar Jesus and Elymas, Simeon, also called Niger, and on and on.
Yeah, well, on that, I mean, like, I thought, like, maybe she was saying, like, Acts, like, I couldn't tell if she said it or not. Like, Acts has Paul's name changed from Saul to Paul, But that's a big misconception I even hear Christians put out. It's not true that Paul is just Saul's like non-Jewish name. Like it was a common thing for Jews to have two names, like the Jewish name and then their Greco-Roman name. And that's so Saul was still Paul throughout his life. He just wrote, because he's writing in Greek to Gentile churches, he just used his Greco-Roman name. So, yeah. But I couldn't tell if she was trying to say that or not.
That must be why he says that he's of the tribe of Benjamin, you guys. Dang, that Philippians writer is so freaking clever.
Wow. You should have said Saul.
Yeah. I thought that came from the School of Mercy, and though I don't even, man, this is something.
I can't keep up.
Nope, can't keep up.
There's one other thing that I think works in alongside that notion of Paul coming from Acts is Paul in the letters is very much Apostle Paul. How do we get Apostle Paul?
This is one of her arguments.
Why, you might ask, why would Paul call himself an apostle? And it's very intentional in Galatians. And as you know, I've worked a lot on Galatians.
Have you?
So why call yourself Apostle Paul? If the whole idea of an apostleship is not known, and in the older paradigm, the 7 authentic letters, early, preceding Acts, preceding even Gospels, because now we're putting the Gospels a little bit later too. So Acts the letters are supposedly the very first instances of New Testament texts. Well, why would someone call themselves an apostle and I think that apostle has a theological overtones. It's not just a messenger, because there is a word apostle that just means a messenger, and it had an association with shipbuilding. But these letters aren't about shipbuilding. It's very theological in the opening. So why call yourself an apostle if there's no apostle even known? Why would I want to say I'm an apostle? Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? So
is she trolling?
Sounds like it.
Like, why would she? I don't know. Maybe because there were apostles, and just because the Gospels weren't written yet, that was a common name for people sent out from the church. I don't know. She's making like a molehill into a mountain with this idea. Like, oh, he calls himself an apostle. The only way he would have done that is if some clever forger had read the Gospels and seen there were apostles, and now we have to turn Paul into one. Like, I don't know. Maybe it was already just an early church thing. This is hyper skepticism. This is unreasonable skepticism. Yep. They're so skeptical, they're proving Proverbs true. Professing themselves wise, they have become fools.
Yeah. And Paul answers that question, 1 Corinthians 9:1, am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Christ Jesus the Lord? He claims he's an apostle because he was a witness to the risen Christ. The risen Christ appeared to him and appointed him as an apostle. In fact, in the book of Acts, the apostles, even when Matthias was chosen, Acts 1, it had to be someone who knew Jesus and who saw Jesus as well after his death and his resurrection. So Paul himself tells us that Christ appeared to him, and he places that appearance in the lineage of the appearance to Peter, to James and the apostles, the 12, and so on.
Yeah. Let's keep going a little bit more. I might skip ahead. This stuff is, wow. It'll put you to sleep if you just listen to this.
So that's another reason why I think you need a gospel with 12 apostles, but it's in Acts where the apostles really come alive and they carry things forward.
And
right. So, and I think the letters are in friction, or you might say contention with Acts, because in Acts is careful to not really dub Paul an apostle. There's one verse in there that maybe suggests that he was an apostle, but I think it's a little dubious whether Paul and Barnabas are apostles.
Okay, this is what Eric you were talking about earlier. This hand waving stuff, like it's Acts 14:14, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul and
It's-
Barnabas are called apostles.
Yeah, Acts 14:14. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of it, I mean, like, okay, like, why is that dubious? I don't get the point. Like, what this you would think this would help her theory. Like, why is Paul being called an apostle? Well, because Acts calls him apostle, and the letters are derivative from the Acts. But like, her theory makes no sense. Here's something that could actually help her theory, as crazy as it is, and she's saying that's, I don't know about that. What?
Yeah. And in Acts 13, Paul is called a prophet. He's among the New Testament prophets as well.
Yeah, I mean, so why not write the letters with prophet and apostle Paul?
Prophet Paul.
Prophet
titles.
Paul of the tribe of Benjamin.
The new
Written by
Shahada.
the
La
school of
ilaha
Marcion.
illallah, Paulo Abdul Rasulullah. Paul is the messenger.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's
You're
get
gonna
into some
get
super chats here.
Getting us in trouble, Tony.
Hold up.
Valid
She's
guys are
skeptical of
coming after us.
St. Ignatius' existence. James White is leaping for joy somewhere. Wait, is she? Because I wasn't sure. Are you sure? Like, she's just floating that?
It feels like it's iffy. She did, but as you see, she like throughout the whole interview, like the interviewer had to finally corner her, and she keeps kind of being like, well, yes, Paul doesn't really exist, but she won't up and say it until he like corners her, and she's like, and so like she seems to be toying with it. She definitely seems to think Polycarp is fake to me, and I think Ignatius and Clement too. She thinks they're dubious.
Of Marcion was authentic. Marcion existed.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. It's just like, this is again hyper skepticism, and then you push these incredibly weird theories that have little to no evidence. But then we Christians believe in things without sufficient evidence, and I'm like, look at this. Like, you'll entertain this. But we're the ones who hold to crazy theories, and
She
stuff that doesn't
says-
have enough evidence.
She says in the other interview, basically, that we don't have sufficient evidence that Paul wrote these letters because we don't have any external evidence
Oh,
that,
let me
that
put that
Paul
up.
exists at all. Yeah, like
Yeah, here's one point here where she says that. I found this here.
yeah.
Paul is said to have been in touch with or engaged with this real person, Gallio, also a mid-first century Roman figure. And another passage in 2 Corinthians where Paul is put in touch with, the Apostle Paul is put in touch with a governor to King Aretas. And that there was a King Aretas, and you can date him to the mid-first century.
And we can do that, right, guys? Because we've got Aretus's letters. Like, he's clearly like, that's a good. We have letters and writings from him, right? Yeah, but we know he existed, even though we don't have secondhand sources and all that stuff.
I she could probably start to doubt Josephus's existence by the same kind of thing. Like, who else talks about Josephus in the first century or even 50 years after he's dead? Like, you just have Josephus's writings. So Josephus is clearly probably of the school of the who knows what, I don't know,
the Ebionites,
the Ebionite Caesar butt kissers,
the Therapeutai, maybe the Therapeutai.
Yeah.
But without additional corroborating evidence of a figure Paul in those locations at that time, or in association with those particular historical figures, actual historical figures, the evidence either within Acts or alone, I should say, the evidence alone, either within Acts or in 2 Corinthians, is insufficient to prove the historicity of this figure, Paul.
I like the guy like nodding, going, "Oh yeah, exactly."
Dude, the guy in the video, the glaze is crazy.
Yeah,
He just glazes that whole
Oh,
thing.
he's got
It's
a window in
odd.
front of him, probably. Yeah.
Terrible.
I mean, like, this is what I've said before. The lot of these skeptics of Christianity or the Gospels are hyper skeptics. the Gospels, Paul's letters now, are guilty until proven innocent. Yeah, Paul seems to be hanging out with these real people and mentioning these real people, but that's not sufficient. We need external evidence. I need an ancient video camera recording Paul handshaking these people, and that's the only way we could ever confirm this stuff. It's like the hyper skepticism, man. That's what this is. It's not reasonable.
Yep.
You could parody this and explain away the existence of Philo or Josephus.
Just classical history. Just throw it in the trash.
You definitely could. You could. Hold on. Let me put this up. I'm gonna go to my channel here for a second. Because we just did this the other day to really just mess with. We're imitating Dennis MacDonald here, and as you can see, we demonstrated shocking proof that the Greek historians were all fiction. They imitated Homer, Thucydides, Polybius, and Herodotus. They didn't really write those histories. They were just imitating Homer, guys. And so we went into that. So yeah, right. You absolutely can parody this. How do I know? I've done stuff like that to show how crazy this stuff is. Yeah.
Yeah, it deserves one of the homers. Don't. That's what we need here.
Yeah, they need. Yeah, on that, let me put up this quote from Bart Ehrman. So this was sent to me by Hopeful Theism. So I thank him for getting this to me. He said, "I've never heard of her or her book until another grad student mentioned her to me. I can't imagine that serious scholars of antiquity will take it seriously, but I haven't seen her argument. Whatever it is, it seems like you could make it for most any ancient author. How do we know Plato existed or Josephus? Now that I think of it, do we even know if she exists?"
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes Ehrman just has the most perfect quote, despite being wrong on so many things. It's like
Homer and Bart Simpson. Okay,
there you go.
That's what we're doing here. Yeah. It's just insane. She'll say King. What is it? What's King? Say the name again, Eric.
Aratus.
Artas. Yeah, I always forget that stupid name. Artas. Yeah. She'll be like, yeah, he obviously existed. We don't have any of his writings. I don't understand why she's not. But then she'll turn around and say, yeah, Paul didn't exist.
He's mentioned externally somewhere, so that's good enough, I guess.
I guess so. Well, why isn't she not a full-blown Jesus mythicist?
Who the heck is going to mention Paul outside of Christianity?
Yeah.
Who is going to care about some wandering vagabond Jew preacher?
Yeah.
It's not like he was running for Caesar or something. Yeah. I don't know.
And make up stories about him, like the Acts of Paul and Thecla, for example, right? Or 3 Corinthians. Why make a forgery about someone who never existed? How can you even sell off a forgery of someone who never really existed?
Right. That whole guy who wrote 3 Corinthians he was defrocked over all that.
Let's get to this one here. Thank you, Testify, for helping me be a better Muslim, says Dawa Troll.
Inshallah.
Powerful.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
Wish I could watch now. Even so, vaya con Dios. Hope I said that right. Ezra inscribed the Paul letters. Ezra corrupted the New Testament and then hid behind Nicaea's guaca tree. This is why the Jews worship Ezra, according to the Surah 9. Yes.
Hadith. Powerful. That's a good hadith there. Yeah.
Powerful.
It was easy to disprove Paul by simply thinking it. Yeah, that's what we do here. Just think it. Paul is disproved. There you go. It's the hyper skepticism I talk about. What do I want to be skeptical of? Well, I'll just this fact here. Now I'll just set the bar of evidence beyond any sort of reasonable expectation. It'll be a total double standard. I won't apply it anywhere else. And then I'll be like, well, I'm just being a free thinking skeptic. I'm just following evidence that fits my rhetorical goals, all that stuff. While Paul was persecuting the Christians, he shouted, "I will humiliate you." Jesus appeared to him and said, "You're finished, boy," then blinded Paul with the eyes of the leather strap of the anus. Uncorrupted Injil.
Yes, then he got a hotel marriage.
What's funny is I've read some hadiths that are
almost on they're that close, yeah.
Almost as crazy as this.
They're like They're like Mad Libs or something. They're just wild.
Oh, for sure.
Paul's silence on temple argument from silence. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, why would Paul need to mention the temple of Jerusalem to Gentiles in Corinth or Thessalonica? Like, they by the way, guys, just want to remind you there's a temple there because in 2,000 years people are going to doubt I existed. So I have to say something to assure. There's no reason for this. You could take like the stream I did with Daryl Bach on Friday, and someone could be like, if this guy really believed in the Hebrew Bible, why did he bring it up? Why did they only talk about the New Testament? Well, it wasn't the topic. We were talking about Gospel of Mark mostly. So we're going to talk about that. Like, Paul in the same matter is talking about things specific. There's no reason for him to bring up random things that aren't going to be relevant. Next crazy theory. Jesus was actually Constantine.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
No, Paul was Constantine.
Paul was Constantine.
Maybe he was Constantinus. Maybe he was the son of Constantine. Oh,
could be both.
Yeah.
Could be both. Sure. So, Jonathan says, Michael, Christians are suffering. My Pakistani friend faces deportation to an Islamic regime. A man was sent to El Salvador without due process. We must stand up for the sojourn and denounce Trump. My response to that is simply, I am a Christian evangelist and apologist. I focus on getting the gospel out. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render to God the things that are God. I'm not going to get political here. Jesus said to pay taxes to a man who was doing all sorts of incredibly horrible things. I don't think Trump is perfect. I think he's done some bad things. I think he's done some okay things. We don't get political here at the end of the day. Our job is to spread the gospel, and that will triumph if we focus on that and not turn Christianity into a political wing of the right or the left. So I completely reject this. Sure, bad things are going to happen in this world. The way you answer that is with the gospel, not taking a political side, because that's just using the weapons of Satan to try to defeat Satan. Okay. Jesus didn't do that.
And let me say, as a Canadian from the 51st state, that I agree with you, Michael.
Yes, and you will be the 50. No, sorry. We've actually had a meeting down here recently. You're going to be the 52nd state, just behind
Excellent.
Greenland.
Inshallah. Inshallah.
Greenland.
Firstly, what are each of you guys' fave Old Testament Bible story? Also, I don't know if IP has seen The Chosen yet, but season 5 is looking insane, asking if Eric or Tony has seen it. So I tried to start watching The Chosen like this week. I made it through 2 episodes. I will try to start watching it again. It was kind of boring. The entire second episode of season 1 was like, we're going to have Shabbat dinner. That sounds great. Let's go have Shabbat dinner. I'm like, could you guys go do some miracles or something? This is so boring.
Yeah, I've stopped watching it because it brings up, it just, it's like the Hulk. It just brings out this incredible anger within me. So no, I've stopped watching it just for mental health reasons.
Listen, when they start donating to this channel, I will endorse it. Okay.
I like certain scenes from The Chosen, but I quit watching it a long time ago too. Right? There's certain parts of it where they just, to me, distort things really, really like gruesomely bad. Like they'll just nail it and hit a grand slam, like amazing scene, and then they'll just totally just. Well, I was going to say something. I won't use those words, but it's bad. So I don't like it. Favorite Old Testament Bible story? Boy, I don't know. I kind of like 2 Chronicles 20 when they're surrounded by 3 different armies and King Hezekiah prays, and then some prophet gets up and he's like, hey, it's going to be okay. And then they send the praise team out front, and the enemies get confused and they fight each other, and then they gather up the spoil. That one's kind of a weird one, but also kind of a fun one, and kind of a cool story about trusting in God in impossible situations. So
yeah, my favorite is Genesis 18, where Yahweh appears to Abraham with 2 angels, and I just love the interaction between Yahweh and Abraham, and just the way he condescends to his level, where Abraham in the end starts bartering. If there's 30 righteous, 20, what about 10? For the sake of the 10, I will spare the city. And so I think it's a beautiful story. He eats with them, and just that wonderful interaction, just the love of God in his condescension to us. So it's one that I really, really love, enjoy.
Yeah, I think my favorite is still going to be the Joseph story. Either that or the Exodus. It's one of those two. Any stuff with that epic Egypt stuff is going to be awesome. So I think the Joseph story is just so cool because like they sends away to slavery and then like he becomes the vizier and it's like surprise. It's like I think it's just a really cool rag to riches story. I love how 99% of history is a single source, but yep, that's true, Tim. I mean, like then the hyper skepticism only applies to like Gospels. I remember one time I wrote to Daryl Bach and I was asked because I was doing a video, like you'll like this, Tony. I was doing a video because atheists were doing this weird idea where they're saying the criterion of embarrassment that's not used at a New Testament studies. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I found like an example from like China. I found an example from like other sources as well. And I put them in there. And I wrote to Daryl Bach. I was like, hey, do you know of any other examples I can use? And he's like, we don't need other examples because those documents are not used in this hyper skeptical nonsense. And so I said, hey, could I just put this quote you said in the video? And he's like, yeah. It's like, I love Daryl Bach. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we know that the historical Muhammad exists because of Dika al-Kabi after the D-Wood debate there. Where all the embarrassment there. Dika al-Kabi, that's right. Yeah.
This video is full of crazy. Kip Davis. Very true. Very true. Very full of crazy. Yes. Richard Carey would be proud. He should be very proud of this channel and what we're doing here. Yeah. It's absolutely. So, all right, let me put back up the video of this nonsense and we'll keep trugging along. There's something she did say, I think after the 20-minute mark I wanted to get to, but we'll see.
So,
Well, it would seem like one way or another that
can somebody please donate to History Valley so he can buy a freaking comb?
I was just going to say that, and maybe shave his neck or something.
I'm sorry. He's a really nice guy from what I've seen.
No, he's
man, this was so distracting. I was like, I had to play some of his sections over again because I was like, wait, I was just focusing on the hair. I need to go back. So yeah.
I think you make an interesting point there because regardless of acts, like okay, in that one little instance it does, but it doesn't accentuate the point too much. But then you get the epistles, which do. Either way is building over Acts. Is your point, and I think it's very interesting because I have wondered in the past. It's always creeped me out that Acts never mentions Paul's letters.
mm-hmm.
And if Paul's letters were written before Acts, but the logic is Acts is independent of Paul's letters, then how do you know they existed before Acts? And even if they somehow did, where did Acts get its information from then?
I feel like
it creeps him out. Creeps him out, he said.
Yeah, it creeps him out. Yeah. Makes sense. Here's what I want to say on this. First of all, if Acts mentioned Paul's letters, they would just dismiss them in the hyper skepticism. They just be like, well, Paul may have written letters, but the ones we have are clearly not his. I mean, like this kind of nonsense. But
it's an interpolation, a later interpolation.
Yeah, you can always find a way to make it work. But maybe, I don't know, maybe Acts doesn't mention Paul's letters because Acts was written early and Paul wasn't famous as a letter writer yet. This is actually probably an argument for the early dating of Acts, if anything, because Paul would have been an evangelist. His letters probably weren't famous until, I don't know, after his martyrdom. And then they were like, well, let's get his writings together and, collect them, this kind of stuff. Like this seems to be a good argument for the early dating of Acts, not their ideas.
Yeah, we got Paul under house arrest in Rome, Acts 28. James' martyrdom is not mentioned yet. James, the Bishop of Jerusalem, his martyrdom is not mentioned. That doesn't happen until about 66, 65 AD. And presumably, Paul was already dead by then. And certainly, Luke mentions the death of James, the son of Zebedee, Acts 12, that Herod had him beheaded. There's no way that Luke would have left the martyrdom of James the Just or the Bishop of Jerusalem. There's no way he would have neglected to mention that event in the history of the church.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to say something, Eric?
Oh, I was just saying this is a whopper of an argument from silence, but I think that's pretty obvious.
Well, when you're in hyper skepticism land, anything flies.
Anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
They hypothesize, as those that believe that will hypothesize different sources or oral tradition, a convenient oral tradition.
Exactly.
How convenient.
Oh, sorry, I hit the wrong button. But yeah, like convenient oral tradition. What do you mean? Like that? Yeah, there are convenient oral traditions because there are oral traditions. man, like I don't understand like how that's a problem.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta go back because somehow I hit the wrong button and it won't let me go back because it's stupid. Man, all right, I'll just do this YouTube. I gotta type the YouTube and I'll just. I don't know why it wouldn't let me go back. That's so weird. Paul never existed. Okay, well that's dumb. All right, I'm sorry about that. I don't know why it did that to me.
What kind of a cut rate production is
Exactly.
this?
Seriously, what is up with this? I don't even get it.
Maybe they took it down. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I'm like, well, can you be sure about that tradition?
I know. I've seen that so much. They fall. It's the fallback. The other.
Well, I mean, like how oral traditions existed. I mean, like that was the main mode of communication. Like, why is it a fallback?
Well, according to her, it's because there's this other thing, this genre of fake letters, like the fake letters of Seneca. And it's just like this thing that people do. They write fake letters to give instruction. Because
Other
apparently
thing.
somebody needed to create a letter to send to some fake Corinthians to tell people to stop doing their stepmom or stop getting drunk at communion. Like what? I don't know. It's
The
weird.
other thing is epistolary scholarship again, and I go back to Rosenmeyer because in my own mind I played around with this notion, which is first, Acts or the letters. But in epistolary scholarship, you need to have the character developed first before you have the letters attributed to the character. And that's repeated in pseudonymous letter.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is called circular reasoning. Well, we know Paul didn't exist, so then therefore they had to make up a character so that they could attribute letters to him. Why? Because we know Paul didn't exist. Like,
Circular.
if you're assuming that Paul didn't exist, then yeah, that's what you would do. But you're assuming the conclusion. Like,
Baking the
man,
question.
like, Dan and I talk about this, how bad some scholars are when it comes to like philosophical methodology, and fallacies just fly left and right.
Collections, which is what I think this is. No one would bother reading letters of Paul unless Paul already existed. And that goes for fictive.
She said, did she just say she just basically proved her point. Like, yeah, makes sense. No one, the Corinthians are to get a letter. Who's this guy? Probably didn't exist. Throw that out.
Or factual characters. So Paul's got to be out there.
Yeah, sure does.
Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
For these letters to have any agency,
Yep.
any effectiveness. There's one other thing that's occurred to me more recently that I've played with, which I think has some credence. It looks like even in Galatians, that autobiographical section, which I've worked on a lot, which Galatians 1, where you see Paul say, "You've no doubt heard of my persecution of Jesus groups, and I tried to kill them," or whatever. I think it's Galatians 1:13. And you just kind of read over that, and you just, with the old paradigm. But how would we have heard of that?
How would we have heard of that, Tony?
How could we ever?
Yeah.
Oral teaching. I mean, Paul knew the Galatians. They were willing to give him their very eyes. They knew he had visionary problems, and obviously he met them. He knew them, and that's why he's astonished that they're leaving the one who called them to the grace of Christ and turning to another gospel. So where would they have heard that from? From Paul himself. He would have, and his companions. They would have told them.
You're forgetting that a clever forger just was trying to do that to make us think this was authentic, and that's just more reasonable than this idea that they had just known that as Christians there was this guy who persecuted and then had an astonishing conversion like that. I mean, that can't be it now.
Yeah.
But if you say, well, yeah, I would have heard about it if I knew Acts. So what I'm thinking is,
Are you thinking?
because pseudonymous letters are really the target of those are not the addressee, the internal addressee, they're external readers. So it looks like that statement is a nod to external readers, the buddies out there who might be hearing this letter or reading that letter. They're the creators, they're the gospel creators, they're the Acts creators. They're in this group of literary producers. So they have Paul say, you've no doubt heard. It's like a nod to the guy in the audience who, read that in Acts.
It's just like the Easter eggs in the Marvel movies.
Yeah,
guys.
the Book of Acts was a New York Times bestseller. I mean, it was in Galatia. It was all over the place.
And then he talked about going to Arabia, and the creators were like, wait, we didn't write about that. What's this a nod to? And then they talked about all the other stuff that doesn't come up in Acts. And yeah, but this one is definitely clearly indications that the Paul's letters were based on Acts. I mean, like, cherry picking much?
Yeah.
Cherry picking?
Could you imagine these letters that are all like these letter writers? They're in this spin room together and they're like, what are we going to write about this time? And it's like, I know. We'll send a letter to Corinth and tell some guy to quit diddling his stepmom because that's really messed up, guys. And then wait. We'll put it in 2 Corinthians 2. Like, we'll say, okay, we delivered him over to Satan and all that other stuff, but the punishment is enough. You guys got to forgive him now. There's a moral of the story. We're Christians here and we forgive. And then we're gonna, like, I don't know, send a letter to the Galatians and say, stop it with this cutting your, the circumcision stuff. What are you doing? And like what is going on? These are so situational and so like weird, in a kind of way. When we really stop and think about it, we're like, it seems more like we're reading somebody else's real mail than like a bunch of people making up a bunch of stuff that apparently they got out of the Book of Acts that doesn't match a lot of stuff in the Book of Acts.
You're just saying that because you're a dishonest McPologist, obviously. I mean,
that's right.
You gotta realize that. That's you're just believing this because you really want Christianity to be true. That's the same reason Richard Carrier is against this, guys, and Bart Ehrman. That's the only reason.
100%.
Powerful.
All right, let's get to some super chats because I need a break from the nonsense. Okay. IP, love your sheer intellectual humility. Thank you. Bro Cook, the sociologist, Phil Zuckerman. Thank you. Thanks to your videos, I changed my worldview to theistic evolution with an ancient Near Eastern context of Genesis. Very much appreciate that. Thank you, sir. You are based. Appreciate it. Very. You're too kind, Alex. You're too kind. Loaves of Bread says, is apostle related to apostate? Most of History Valley is going really far with theories. John Revelation could be different authors. Goes crazier. Yeah, is apostle related to apostate in Greek, Tony?
No.
Okay.
I mean, the apo preposition means from. So apostolos is one who is sent forth, and apostate is one who falls from standing. So stasis, a standing, apo, a falling from standing. So that refers to a falling away from the faith.
Okay. What do you think of Dante's Inferno? I find his punishments to be horrifying and overkill. Yeah, of course it is. I mean, it's a medieval work. It's very interesting on the beliefs of the time, but I don't think it's a good representation of hell, purgatory, or heaven.
And Muhammad's there too, according to Dante.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I think that's accurate. I mean,
yeah, it's a given.
Yeah. I meant to ask, because Paul doesn't talk about the temple's destruction and therefore before 70 AD would be an argument from silence. Would that be an argument from silence fallacy?
I don't think so. There would be no. I mean, there would be no need for him to mention it. I mean, the Book of Acts mentions Paul going to Jerusalem. He does make a Nazirite vow and shaves his head and offers up sacrifice to show the Jews that he's a loyal Jew. And James suggests that he do this. I mean, the Book of Acts clearly presupposes the temple's still standing. Why else would Paul go there and do the Nazirite vow? But in his letters, he's writing predominantly to Gentile Christians who would have no vested interest in the temple. For Paul, it's I want to know nothing among you but Christ and him crucified. And so, I mean, in Colossians, which liberal scholars think are Deutero-Pauline. Colossians, he makes reference to the new moon, the Sabbath, the annual feast days, and how that has found its completion in Christ. And all of these things are a shadow, and which incidentally, the book of Hebrews uses the same Greek word to refer to the Mosaic law, which was a shadow of that which was to come in Christ.
Yeah.
Clearly, the writer of those letters read Acts 20 something or other, where he's doing these things, and they're like, let's make Paul this really like, you know, we don't have to follow the Moses' law thing. I mean, you're creating attention. Again, these are things that can be resolved, but like, how is a fake Paul getting that from reading Acts letters? It's bizarre.
I don't know. Testifying Tony, Quran has Gnostic sources in the text.
Yes, it does. It does quote from the infancy gospel of Thomas, where Jesus speaks from the cradle. He makes clay birds and animates.
I have a question. Are those? Can we match those literarily?
Can we what? Sorry.
Can we match them like literarily? Like, is it like similar wording that we can show?
Yeah,
that
it's similar wording in the Gospel of Thomas, the infancy gospel. Jesus says, "I am the Son of God," whereas in the Quran it says, "I am the servant of Allah. I am the slave of Allah." And also in Surah 4:157, where you have the crucifixion being dismissed, there's a line there that says, "They crucified him not, nor did they kill him, but it appeared so to them." And that language does come from a docetic, some of the docetic Gnostic Gospels, where you have Jesus. There's one called the Gospel of the Laughing Savior, where Peter's watching the crucifixion take place, and he hears someone laughing behind him. He turns around, it's Jesus. And Jesus says, "They think they're crucifying me, but it only appears so to them." So that type of language is clearly in the Quran, and there's no doubt that Muhammad would have heard that from some Gnostic groups in Arabia.
What makes up a person to attribute letters to when there's other people who actually exist you can do that for? Isn't that the supposed method of the gospel title? Skeptics, not so skeptic. Why make up a person to attribute letters to when there's other people? Yeah, that's a good point here. What I think you're getting at, like, why not make up letters that are from some of the disciples, like Andrew or Philip or Thomas? Like, why are we making up some guy who doesn't show up in Jesus's life, only in Acts, and
and really has to fight for his like validity, especially like we see that in 2 Corinthians so much.
Yeah, and half of the New Testament is the letters of Paul.
Yeah. Well, it's the same with like Mark and Luke. If you're going to make up gospel authors, you could do a much better job. Than Mark and Luke,
for sure.
I mean, same with Matthew. The one gospel for the Jews is written by a tax collector.
Yeah.
This is the stuff we get from the critical scholars just makes me go like, you guys need to take a philosophy class, because like you don't understand how methodology is actually working here. Your explanations are so more convoluted than just the simplest explanations.
Yeah.
After watching your live stream, I'm still unsure after David's debate. Alex does a great job of portraying Jesus as Messiah, not God. Advice. Well, I don't know what you mean. I mean, there's plenty of evidence Jesus claims to be God, as we pointed out in that stream. I mean, the Lord argument. Look at how the fact Alex didn't even understand it, couldn't really respond to it. He didn't respond to any of David's two power in heavens arguments. He just focused on the whole use of proskuneo and was Jesus ever received worship. That was his main argument. But at the same time, like, that is just that's misdirect. That's redirecting to arguments David did not make in the debate, and not focusing on the actual arguments where Jesus explicitly claims to be Yahweh. Like Luke 6:46, Matthew 7:21-22, John 8:58. I mean, and then of course Mark opens by claiming Jesus is God. Watch my recent videos I did back and forth with Dan McClellan. They're on the YouTube channel on Mark 2. Jesus claims to be ontologically God in those verses. So she would dismiss oral tradition if she were talking about. She wouldn't dismiss oral tradition if she were talking about primitive cultures. Yeah, but I mean, like, the first century Jews were primarily an oral culture. Like, texts were there to help oral renditions. They were not the primary mode of like how they would like pass on information, because most people couldn't read or write, and reading and writing material was expensive.
Someone I think brought up in the chat that 2 Peter 3, 15 to 6. Second Peter 3, 16 to 17, where Peter actually refers to Paul's letters and calls them. He puts them in the category of scripture. That the unstable they pervert and they distort the scriptures, including Paul's letters, and he categorizes it as they do the other scriptures. Now, even if you were to argue that Second Peter is not really Peter, as most liberal scholars do, you would still have to argue that whoever wrote Second Peter acknowledged Paul, and in his time acknowledged Paul's letters to be in the same category as scripture and therefore authoritative for the church. Yeah.
All right, let's put this video back up, play a little bit more, and if I'm getting so incredibly bored with it, so I don't know how much more we're going to play, but I'll keep my eyes open as best I can.
That's how I'm reading that now. Probably needs more development, but
A little bit.
I just
Might
think
need
Acts
some more
has
development.
the
Is that a belch,
priority.
guys?
What's that?
Might need a little more development.
Was that a belch or a hiccup?
Might have been.
It sounded like he belched.
Stuff happened.
Do you believe the Pauline epistles tell us anything reliable about the historical Paul, even if none of them are by Paul himself?
Well, I've kind of indirectly answered that.
Yeah, that's true.
And the thing about Acts, and there's been some work done on this, where Acts plays around with names. There's many characters who end up with multiple names, and it's a literary technique to show a transformation of some kind. Paul becomes missionary to the Gentiles, and so his name kind of takes on, he gets this Roman name. So there's this playing around.
He always had the name.
Yeah, I think she contradicted herself there, because she insinuated there was a deliberate change there. Now she's admitting that people had multiple names. So it sounds like she's going against what she said originally.
Around with names. So in the scholarship, it's funny, when you read Acts, we hear about the author playing around with names, but somehow when it talks about the name Paul, that author doesn't play around with that name.
What is the argument here?
Still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, okay, I'll just play some more. I don't understand her point here, or how this means anything.
There is so much wrapped around Paul, the historicity of Paul, and the letters being genuine, that even though good scholars know about Acts and how it uses names, how it creates narratives.
What are you doing here?
I'm talking with my hands.
So are you mimicking her?
It's not like Trump.
I'm trying to stay awake. I'm staying awake.
Trump does.
It's okay. People talk with their hands. I'm just trying to stay awake.
Want to touch Paul.
You're telling.
So I think that's a little strange too. And I think we need to see Paul as part of the character mix in Acts.
What?
It's a long way around of getting away from that exact answer of historical.
There's no argument there. I don't even understand her argument here.
I think she's just rambling.
Yeah. I'm going to play a little bit more and then we're just going to stop.
Yeah.
Why do you think the letters were composed?
Well, it's here that I think that if there was some genius involved in this early Christian literature, it was the composition of letters. And that's another thing that one can think about. Why does the New Testament have all these letters? Where you think about the Hebrew Bible, there aren't any standalone letters. There's one in what we call intertestamental works, this letter of Jeremiah.
Okay, so because there aren't any letters in the Hebrew Bible, therefore, doesn't she also think like a lot of that is forgery too? So why does that matter? Like, if anything, this would not support her position because
So
the letters would be more
she-
authentic.
She thinks this is a genre. She thinks this is a genre because Seneca's got a bunch of fake letters and all this other stuff. And that
There's
the
fake
only
letters.
time-
We know that.
Yeah, and there's fake letters. And so the only time that we see the Pauline letters is when they're in a collection, which is what we see with these other letters. And so they have to be in a collection. She kind of like speculates like, well, why don't we have like one manuscript of just Romans and from the first century? So they're only in collections. Yeah, because Paul was dead and people wanted to collect his letters because they started to regard them as scripture and that he was an apostle and they might want to hang on to his writings. But she thinks, no, that's too spooky. That's too sketchy. It's got to fit better with this other theory of people writing fake letters. So again, you got somebody writing fake letters to people about, about circumcision and getting drunk during the Lord's Supper and diddling their stepmom and, whatever other situations that Paul is writing in these occasional letters, dealing with stuff, giving the Romans a bunch of doctrine and all this other stuff. That makes more sense to her, I guess, but it's
something.
I mean, the book of Esther, there's letters in the book of Esther. In the Hebrew Bible, the book of Esther, there's letters. So I don't know why she has to go through the intertestamental period to argue for that.
Yeah, it's a weird argument. It's like, I would think like the fact that there are letters in the New Testament from her perspective would make them seem more authentic, because wouldn't she be someone who would say a lot of the Old Testament is forgery, mythology, and it's not letters? Like, why is it always mythology or fiction, regardless of how we look at it? I would be really curious to know if she thinks like the Old Testament stuff is mythology, forgery, fiction, you name it, whatever you want to call it.
So it's very interesting that you would have Paul take on agency with letters.
Why?
And why I think it's genius is because of the power of the letter genre itself. Maybe one of the most important points here is a letter seems real.
You heard it here, folks. A letter seems, I wonder why the letters seem real. Maybe. I don't know. They're real. I don't know. I just did a crazy idea I have there. So
people just wanted to fake a letter to some guy named Philemon about a runaway slave named Onesimus and include a bunch of weird names, that make it seem legit for reasons, apparently.
Yeah, for sure. Man, I'm done. I'm done playing that video. This is just complete nonsense. Can we just move on from this sensationalist crap? And then again, what's going to be the next crazy theory we're going to hear about? Anything to avoid the traditional view.
It's weird. Well, another thing I just wanted to throw this in here that I think is weird is if these are fake letters, like there's this theme of like this collection for the saints. And so you have like 1 Corinthians 16, 1-4, where they talk about setting aside weekly offerings. And then in 2 Corinthians 8-9, you see Paul sending Titus to encourage them to finish. In Romans 15, 25-28, you see Paul's ready to deliver it, but this is like years later. And then out of Acts, he's just before Felix, and he's like, hey, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, I brought alms to my countrymen. So it's like the theory here is like, okay, this really clever forger decided to weave all of this stuff. And there's Galatians 10 or 2:10 where it says like, hey, the apostles told me to remember the poor and all this other stuff, and I was eager to do that. So it's spread across 4 different letters in Acts, spanning multiple years, churches, messengers, travel plans, like Titus, who probably doesn't exist, laced with personal anxiety, Paul kind of pressuring them and shaming them, like, hey guys, like, let me give you an awkward guilt trip about this offering that you said you were going to have, all kinds of moving parts. But yeah, it's just a clever forger just looking up this random one statement that Paul makes to Felix. And it's like, I'm going to weave all this crap between 4 different letters because I'm a clever genius, guys. Like, about a fundraiser. Like, what the heck kind of lesson are people going to get out of that in the 2nd century? Like, there was a famine in Jerusalem, and like, we actually know that happened from Josephus. Like, maybe that just fits in the actual context of what happened. I don't know.
Maybe.
I can't.
Maybe.
I can't.
We got to take what you say with a grain of salt because you're a dishonest
I'm
apologist.
just conspiracy theory. I sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. Like this is clearly up there with QAnon kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
know? But she's totally rational.
Totally. All right, let's get to some super chats here, and then we'll close this out. Unless you guys want to talk about anything else. This is from an earlier guy. I fear if the abolitionists thought the same, there would still be slaves. We are in extreme times, and I cannot help my friends by silence. Okay, then help your friends. What do you want me to do? Okay, I don't think we're in extreme times. For
I
sure.
would say
I don't think
turn off the news and go
turn off the news.
touch
The
grass.
news wants you to think you're in extreme times because that's what the news gets money from. The 24-hour news is 24-hour news so they can keep selling sensationalist nonsense.
It's on
Get
both
out, touch
sides,
grass, turn off social media. And I don't think anything today, the only thing I would say is comparable to the abolitionist movement of the 1800s would be abortion today.
Yeah.
Where millions of babies are being killed, and we're just going, well, no, that if anything, that should be what Christians should be fighting the most, and they are. We're not going to turn Christianity into a political wing of whatever side. I've heard conservative Christians say the same thing when Obama was president or when Joe Biden was president. We really need to focus on this because this is really bad. I'm like, this is not an extreme time. And the abolitionist, for example, is completely different because I'm going to have a video come out in June, but hundreds of thousands of people were being tortured and killed and raped. I mean, not comparable, not comparable, I would say. Are there bad things happening? Yeah. But I mean, if this is what you're passionate about, Jonathan, you do it. Don't think you're going to recruit me because God has called me here to do this. You go focus on your stuff.
Yeah.
Can you be saved or sanctified through your spouse? My grandpa died believing in God, but not a Christian. My dad is wondering if there's any hope for him and stressed about this. Please answer this question with care. Okay. Here's what I would say about that. God is perfectly just and omniscient and perfectly loving. He will know how to judge properly. There was one time a woman wrote to Martin Luther because she miscarried and she was crying. She was upset because she was worried the kid was not going to be in heaven. And Martin Luther wrote back a way that I thought was really interesting and profound, was that God hears the prayers of his saints and he will remember them. So I think there is hope. Trust God, trust he will make the right decision, and trust that you will. He also promises that whatever that is, you will be satisfied with it. So put your faith in him. Know that he's perfectly just and perfectly loving. He will judge properly. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, that there is no injustice with God. There's no mistrial in God's court. And so rest in God's, rest in his mercy, rest in his justice as well. And just keep doing what you're doing, Matt. And St. Augustine once said that when we get to heaven, we'll be surprised to find people there that we thought would never be there. And conversely, we'll be surprised to see people there that we will not see people there that we thought would be there. So again, rest in the mercy of God, rest in his justice. There is no injustice with God. And so it's one of those things where you need to lean on the Lord. Deuteronomy 29:29 says, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the revealed things belong to us and to our children. So again, rest in his peace, rest in his justice and mercy.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of people surprised when I'm in heaven. They're gonna be you're here. Just wait. You had that Eric Manning on your channel. There's no way you're getting into heaven.
That's right. He's a corrupter.
I'm a new Christian, so at first a lot of this stuff goes over my head. I'll rewatch your live with this knowledge. Thanks. Yeah, check out some books that argue Jesus is God. There's a really good book called Putting Jesus in His Place by Robert Bowman Jr. and Ed Komaszewski. Highly recommend that. It's a good short read. They give a lot of evidence in that short book that Jesus is God. Check out Darrell Bock's book. I believe it's called Jesus the God Man. The first half, you won't even realize he's arguing Jesus as God, but then the second half he does, and he does it really powerfully. So check out those books for sure. I've heard of a man of letters, but she is a woman of fake letters. There we go. For sure. I think it is a move by some scholars to counter the Habermas defense of the bare minimum facts of Jesus, which uses Paul's accepted letters. Because if Paul didn't exist, he cannot be used as evidence. Look at Eric feeling just vindicated over there.
This is why you guys need to be maximalists like your boy and Than, the other boy. Then you can refute this retarded nonsense. And
I did,
but yeah. It's retarded. You could I'm sure Habermas would have no problem dunking on this, either. So it's that. It's just bad.
I did get a little cynical listening to her being like, "Oh yeah, they're bringing this stuff up now so that they can really dismiss the resurrection because it relies a lot on Paul. Relies a lot on Paul. We'll just throw Paul out there. Boom." Now, to be fair, though, I mean, people like Bart Ehrman are like, this is ludicrous nonsense, so I don't think that's really what's going on. But yeah, I get why people would be suspicious.
Then you can just really crush it if you're
for sure
take the maximal approach.
Super chat, because you guys are the goats. Keep it up and testify. Love your Islam content, especially about the self-certifying prophecy. Yeah, Eric and I should do some stuff on Islam again, maybe on a stream or something. The last one we did was playing to that Bobby guy. That was fun.
Bobby's perspective.
Yeah. You have stuff on Islam, right? Right, Tony?
Yes. I've been doing it for about 40 years and debated. I just came back from Arizona. I was debating Shadid Lewis there. We had 2 debates down there, so it's pretty good.
Yeah. What was the topic?
One was does the Quran confirm or disprove the Bible? The other one was that the early followers of Jesus believed that he was God in human flesh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's a follow-up there. That's a Q&A session there I had with Shadid Lewis. And if you scroll down, you'll notice there's there it is on the far right there. For second row, did Jesus' first followers believe he was God in the flesh? And then I did another one on the Quran with him.
You got to work on your thumbnails here. I'm very disappointed.
I know. Yeah, I got a web designer who might help me.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, and Eric's channel is linked below too, but you don't have to subscribe to that. It's nonsense.
If you like the self-certifying prophecy, Joshua, check out my live. I did one with God Logic. We actually talked mostly to Mormons.
Okay.
Really?
Who also used the self-certifying thing because Joseph in Genesis 50:33. I don't know if you guys knew about Genesis 50:33.
Mm-hmm.
He does the exact same thing, and so it's fun because you can pit. It's a 2 birds with 1 stone kind of argument there. So
yeah.
So we mostly talked to Mormons. We had 1 Muslim, but it was fun times.
Everything I know about Joseph Smith, I learned from South Park. Joseph Smith was called a prophet. Dum 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 dum. Lucy Harris, smart.
Some of their finest work.
Thank you for the super chat. Pray for us in the UK. I'm having to fight for time off work to go to church on Good Friday. It's sad to see what this country is becoming. Yeah, it is a dumpster fire over there.
Well, by the way, I'm going to be going to London second week of June. So I'll be doing some work there. You going to be there, Michael?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
You're going, Eric, or
no,
he's not cool.
Are you with the J. Smith group, Michael?
Yep.
Yeah, I couldn't make the first week, so I'll be coming the second week. You still be there?
Oh, nope. I'm flying out.
Oh, okay.
That weekend. I got something else planned.
Yeah, I couldn't make it the first week, but I'll be there the second week. I'll be at Speaker's Corner, and we're also training some churches on how to evangelize Muslims. Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, I will. First week, I'm coming in early because I'm doing some stuff with some debates.
For Justin Brierley, unbelievable.
Not him anymore. Now it's Andy Kine. Yeah.
Oh, someone else. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta
get caught up.
Yeah. Old timer.
Why does Dan McClellan look exactly like Language Jones? Also, YouTube is blocking my chats. Had to use my spare account from Mojab's defamation defense lawyer. Who is in Language Jones?
I've
never heard of Language Jones. So it's a YouTuber. Okay, I'm gonna put this guy up because and you guys can be the judge.
Yeah,
this guy looks like Dan McClellan. Maybe a little.
It's time for the Yiddish word of the week because
maybe a little
bit. They could be brothers.
Or maybe distant cousins. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll give it to him.
He's not condescending looking enough.
You're mean.
It's
Although
true.
he's been very, very mean to me. So I mean, I'll let it pass given how mean he's been. And he's very condescending to me too. Yeah, for sure. A question for you guys: is Jesus contingent on the Father? Does the early church hold to that position? Yes. Jesus is not aseity. Aseity is only the Father has aseity. So Jesus is begotten of the Father. His whole being is of the Father. Only the Father is the one true God. This is why Dr. Joshua Sijuwati says the Father is God in a numerical sense. The Son and Spirit are God in a predicative sense. Or as I say, ontologically God.
Mm-hmm.
So hope that clarifies that. So what do you have coming up on your channel, Eric? Anything exciting, new, fun?
I'm doing a series right now, how to be a better Muslim. So I've been so like one of them is like a recent one was like go ask a Jew about the Torah, because why do they come to you, Muhammad, when they have the Torah for judgment? And so go ask a Jew about the Torah. You're going to find Muhammad in the Torah too, supposedly. Just ask Lily J. And then also I'm doing a similar one for the go ask a Christian about the Injil. Don't say that Muhammad did miracles, because the Quran's like, hey, you were already given the Quran, that's sufficient. So if you're saying that he did miracles and you're saying that it's insufficient, don't be a kafir, get the heck out of my house, as Sheikh Azakim said to Sneeko there. And then blame Jesus for Christianity, because he says, hey, Jesus, did I tell you to people to worship you and your mom, and all that other kind of stuff. And so that's a little series that I'm doing. And then I'm going to start doing, I've been finding that I will just need to probably do more deep dives. So I'm going to start doing more lives. So I'll probably do stuff like this, or I might just like run through some slides. I'm also going to invite people to come up and have conversations. I've done a few with Jonathan McClatchy, who I know Tony knows a little bit.
Yeah, I know.
And we talked to like doubting Christians. If you have any questions, we kind of give people an idea of what the Talk About Doubts ministry that he has is like, and we'll answer questions. Then I'm also going to open it up to like people of other faiths. I'll probably focus some streams on Islam, kind of like Avery does on his channel, God Logic, and as well as like, just anybody. So I'm trying to kind of stretch myself out there and get out of my comfort zone. But I'm just finding that in order to get, I'm so used to just making really short, kind of punchy videos. But I'm going to run out of things to say with those. And so I want to be able to go deeper. So I'm going to have to just do more of those. So that might become
cool,
like at least half the videos that I do, if not 75% of the videos that I do going forward.
Good. Anything you want to promote, Tony?
Yeah, I'm going to be this week being Holy Week. I'm going to be quite busy with church. Next week I'll have Hatun Tash on with me, and we'll be discussing the Quran and the Bible. The week after that, I'm hoping to get Anthony Rogers. He just debated a Muslim imam in North Carolina, and so we're going to be reviewing that debate. I'm also supposed to be having a debate with a Seventh-day Adventist pastor on the Seventh-day Sabbath, and that will be with Answering at Adventism's channel, Miles Christian. So that'll be April, what is that? April the 28th, Monday, April the 28th. And I'll have some stuff out on, I'm preparing a video to put out maybe next week on the Hafs and the Warsh versions of the Quran, and how we have real textual variance between the two. Because one thing we keep hearing all the time, of course, is that the Quran has been the same, preserved since the time of Muhammad, not just to the letter, but to the dots, the diacritical points that didn't even exist in the time of Muhammad, that they've been preserved even to the strokes and the diacritical points. So I'm going to show where there are, you can see it even in the Arabic. You don't have to know Arabic to see that the letters are different. So I'll be working on that. I also have a new book out, No King But Christ: The Collapse and Bankruptcy of Secular Worldviews. That's available on Amazon. So it just came out last December, and I deal with a lot of what is the place of the church and the Christian in our contemporary society. So a lot of it has to do with social justice, so-called, the whole cultural Marxist understanding, and how ultimately it is a It is a battle against the king. It's Psalm 2, verse 1. The nations have gathered themselves, the kings, the rulers of the earth have opposed Yahweh and his anointed one. So it's available on Amazon. No King But Christ. That's the main title.
Cool. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
Based.
I will be, when is that? I'm going to be in Brisbane for anyone who wants to come out and meet me. What are the dates on that again? It's going to be May 12th or like the 13th or the 20th or something like that. It's with Questioning Christianity. So if anyone's in Australia, look that up. They're going to be posting stuff about that soon. So that's what I got coming up.
You're going to the land down under.
And they'll have real accents, unlike yours.
Maybe you can meet up with Lily J and have a debate or something.
Oh, wow.
She'll be like, hey, ChatGPT. I'll be like, hey, Grok. And then we'll have Grok and ChatGPT debate each other.
That's right.
So have you guys accepted that Paul didn't exist? I sure have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was so convincing. Yeah.
So convinced. Yes, yeah. But top scholarship right there. So.
Oh, yeah.
Foxy Grandpa, wait, only the Father is the one true God. So Jesus says in John 17:3, you are the true God, is what he's saying. Now, there is a case to be made that at the end of the first epistle of John, Jesus is called the true God as well. So they may just be designating the Father as true God, while also Jesus is by the same author later on. However, I'm a monarchical Trinitarian, which is Dr. Joshua Sijiwadi's view, which is that we say, again, the Father is God in a numerical sense. The Son and Spirit are God in a predicative sense. Now, they're all ontologically God. They share all the same intrinsic properties. So Jesus is not ontologically subordinate. The Spirit isn't ontologically subordinate. But the Father does have a satiety in that he is uncaused. And so that's why Jesus can speak of him like that. And Sijiwadi uses that verse, for example, to help support that. So hope that helps. You can look up some more stuff on that. You could look up lectures or interviews on YouTube by Dr. Joshua Sijiwadi. You'll get some good stuff on that. So, all right. Anything else, or can I stop talking? We can close this out.
We're good. I'm good.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, just one more thing. Last week of June, I will be in Franklin, Tennessee at the John Bunyan Conference. So if any of you folks are in the Tennessee, Nashville, Franklin area, be good to see you.
Cool. Excellent. All right. I'll be back streaming. I'm going to have a video coming out tomorrow on Easter, but I'll be back streaming again Monday. We're going to be talking about 2 Kings 3 and if Chemosh defeated Yahweh with some scholars. So we're going to be so dogmatic.
That again.
Yeah, so. All right. I'll see you guys then. You made it to the end of this video, which means this message matters to you. If you want to see more content like this reaching people for Christ, you can help make it happen. Your support makes these videos possible. Click the link below and donate today. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining our Patreon community. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and a place to connect with others passionate about this mission.